I am a 56-year-old Vietnam veteran and business consultant. I do not do drugs and do not understand the following story. We used to live in a 2-story, 10-year-old house in Fremont, California. We lived there until May of 2003. In December 2002, just a few days before Christmas, I woke up at about 5:30 or 6 a.m. and walked over to the bedroom window. I parted the vertical blinds and cursed under my breath because it was still raining like it had been for days. As I turned away from the window, my body chilled from head to toe. Standing right in the middle of our bedroom doorway was this huge ghost dressed in a hooded brown robe. The guy was at least 7 feet tall and filled the whole doorway. Where his face should have been in the big hood was just like a swirling mass of energy, and you also couldn't see any hands or feet. But he totally filled the whole doorway. As I looked at him, he extended his arms forward like he was offering me the short staff or rod that he was holding. It was maybe 24 inches long. Then I turned my head away for a moment, and when I looked back, he was gone. I left my wife asleep as I drove to work, still kind of in shock and debating whether to tell my wife. I decided to and called her on my cell phone. She was silent for a few months, then said, "Oh my God, that explains it. I thought I was dreaming, but I opened my eyes after you left, and this huge figure in a long brown robe and hood was leaning towards me from your side of the bed, like he was offering me this short rod or stick. Then when I sat up in bed, he was gone." Now we were both feeling kind of strange. That night, on the way home from work, my wife stopped to use a gas station restroom, something she'd never done before since she only worked 20 minutes from home. When she arrived home, she pulled into the garage and pushed the button to close the garage door behind her. As soon as she stepped into the house, she could see it had been robbed. Our son Colin, who lived with us, had come home 5 minutes earlier and had surprised 2 armed gunmen up on the 2nd floor in the dark. Colin ran out of the house with the robbers behind him. They got away, but hadn't stolen anything. If my wife had arrived home just a few minutes earlier, as she usually did, she would have locked herself in the house with 2 armed robbers. I do not understand what has happened. Who was the brown robe figure? Was he there that morning to warn us about what was going to happen that night? I don't know, but it's kind of creepy. He never appeared again. But that night, Colin reminded us that several weeks earlier, he had been alone with his girlfriend in the living room, sitting on the sofa. Something caused him to get the chills. As he looked up, he saw this robed figure looking down at them from the railing in the loft above them. They quickly left the house. When Colin originally told me his story, I had told him that he had a very active imagination. Then a couple weeks later, the robed figure appeared to me, and then my wife. That night, as I was cutting sections of round, rod-like wood dowels to put in the window sashes, I got the chills again. Was the guy trying to hand me a staff or rod to try and tell me to put it in the windows? If anyone has info on ghosts in hooded brown robes with a rod or staff, I'd sure like to hear it. An Asian lady friend told me about a house of hers who knew of this kind of thing and called him a guardian angel that somebody has to give you or will to you. My brother-in-law Larry was killed in Vietnam on September 20th, 1970. To say his death left an enormous hole in our lives would be an understatement. To this day, we often speak of him and remember him fondly as a much beloved member of our family. I've always been very close to my eldest sister. She and my brother-in-law were married only 3 years when he died. Having been widowed at age 23, she decided to remain on her own and live in the house they had recently purchased. Thus began my frequent visits to stay the nights on the weekends and keep her company. One night, not quite 2 years after Larry's death, we had both been in bed for less than half an hour. I was 15 years old. My sister was 25 at the time. Neither one of us had ever had any type of encounter that we considered out of the ordinary, but this one night would change that. As we began to doze off after our customary chatting between rooms, I slept in our spare room directly across the hallway from her bedroom with our doors open. We both clearly heard footsteps crossing the kitchen floor, not a dozen feet down the hallway from where we slept. The footsteps sounded like someone was wearing heavy, leather boots, and when they reached the carpet in the hallway, the footsteps naturally silenced a bit, with only the sound of heavy padding and an occasional creak to give away the fact that they were still coming down the hall. While this was happening, my sister called out from her room and asked if I could hear that, and I answered her immediately that I could. By this time, the covers of the bed were securely over my head. There was no way I wanted to see what was going to soon pass by my door, or worse, maybe into my room. The next thing I knew, my sister was reporting a nearly opaque, adult-sized mist forming in her room, just opposite her bed in front of her dark pine closet doors. The moon was full that night, so there was just enough light filtering through her shutters to softly illuminate the room so she could clearly see what was happening. Although I was nearly sweating with fear, I still asked what the mist was doing, of course hoping in part that it would not float my way. Apparently, it hovered for a bit in front of her closet doors, then floated around the bed to the other side of the room before it began to dissipate. Her dog, who slept in her room and would bark at the smallest of unfamiliar sounds, never awoke. Needless to say, we slept little for the remainder of the night. Still, we were convinced that Larry had returned for a visit. After that incident, while she never received such a visit again, my sister did have a lampshade that would repeatedly turn askew during the day while she was at work. The lampshade was rectangular in shape, so it was easy to spot when someone twisted it around. I witnessed this myself. We would go to bed at night, only to find the shape askew again in the morning. This went on in spurts, off and on, until she sold the house and moved nearly 8 years after the night of the footsteps. The shade was twisted tightly down. An earthquake couldn't jar it loose unless the lamp fell completely to the floor. The lamp itself stayed perfectly stationary, only the shade was twisted. We always thought this was Larry's less scary way of letting us know he was still around. The day my sister moved into her new home, the lampshade never twisted askew again. A few days ago, I was sitting on my bed in a small room that has a side window. I turned on my computer and started listening to music. Everything was okay until suddenly, I saw a human shadow through the window. It was just a shadow, yet I could make out the head and the body. There were no hands or legs. It disappeared after 5 seconds, and I was shocked. I turned on the light and ran down to find out who it might be, and you know what? My yard was empty. I looked around for a few minutes, then I came back home. I still didn't know who or what it was. But that wasn't all. That night, I went to bed around 11 p.m. I had just fallen asleep when I suddenly woke up and felt frozen. I couldn't move. Something was pushing my body and I was hurting. After a few minutes of being frozen, I then felt like I was about to blow up. I got out of my bed and I was breathing hard. I had no idea what was happening. Then, I heard some strange sounds from my kitchen. It sounded like chewing sounds. I ran down my kitchen, turned on the light, and there was nothing down there. Around midnight, I was freaking out, so I called my friend to come to my house. When he drove up, I saw a girl in a white dress and with long hair standing next to the gatehouse. I felt scared, and I screamed to my friend, "Hey, watch your back." Just then, the figure disappeared. My friend saw it as well, and he was more frightened than I was. He said the shadow had been right next to him. The figure looked like a 20-year-old girl with a white face, but also Vietnamese. It was extremely unusual. We sat next to the bed until morning. The next day, I invited another friend to come over and take some pictures, but nothing happened that day or the day after. I think the ghost just visited the house to make us look horrible and to scare us a little bit. Isn't that what ghosts do? Thanks for reading. When I got back from Vietnam, I went to live with my mother in Chicago. Chicago is where I was born and lived all my life. My encounter happened either in 1968 or 1969. My mother had a summer home in northern Illinois and would go there every weekend, so I would be home in our third-floor apartment every weekend by myself. I would usually fall asleep on our front room couch watching TV. One night, I woke up somewhere in the middle of the night and went to the kitchen for a glass of water. As I walked through the doorway, going into the kitchen, a transparent short-haired or bald man or boy ran out from our pantry, looked me straight in the eye, almost like he hesitated for a split second, then ran into the gas stove area and disappeared. The look in his eyes was like someone being startled or caught doing something wrong. It was so real that when he ran closely by me, I kind of moved back, like if someone is going to bump into you. It all happened so fast, and I was in the process of waking up, so it didn't really hit me as to what just happened or what I just saw. I just continued to the sink for my glass of water. Mind you, this all took place in seconds. As I turned on the water and filled my glass and started to drink, it then hit me. Wow, I stopped. I was just in a little shock. I was frightened. Then I thought maybe some intruder was in the house, but no. This figure ran right into the stove and disappeared. And this figure was semi-transparent. Needless to say, I was afraid. I thought that maybe because I saw him, he would kill me in my sleep, so I couldn't tell anyone. I stayed up half the night and finally did fall asleep. 1 or 2 years later, I found out that the landlord's son had died in our house. I don't know what floor or exactly when or how, but I do know it was before my encounter. My mother moved out of the house, and I got married and went on with my wife. I never went back there to see if I could find a picture of the landlord's son. For many years, I thought about it and wished that I would have gone back, but now it's too late. This was over 40 years ago now. I'm somewhat of an artist, not very good, but I did draw a face picture of my encounter. I don't know what happened to that picture. The vision that I have of him is vivid in my mind to this day. Maybe I should try to draw another picture. And that's my story. In my senior year of high school, the Vietnam conflict was still going on, and I had a pen pal who was over there. At lunchtime, I would leave the school and go over to a small church located a block from the school and sit in there and pray that my pen pal was okay. One day, I was leaving the church to go back to school, and I noticed a very old 1950s car across the street. There was a man standing outside of the car and a very young boy playing with the wheel. The boy looked to be about 5 to 6 years old. As I was walking out, the man beckoned to me across from the street. When I got there, the man said that the man looked too old to have a son that age, wants to know why I went into that church. I smiled and said, to pray for the end of the Vietnam conflict. The man told me some things that were personal, then stated that the conflict would end soon, but another will start. I smiled and walked about 10 to 20 feet and looked back. There was no car, no one around. I was close enough that I would have heard the engine start and see the car go away, but nothing. Way back in the 70s, when our neighborhood wasn't very occupied and only a few houses were around, my aunt, one of my sisters and my mom, was left alone in our spooky, dark, and silent house. She was left playing in one of our living rooms where a lot of spiritual activity happens. Suddenly, she could hear footsteps coming from the ceiling, hard and loud footsteps that seemed to linger right above where she was playing at. Chills crept up her spine and she began to move away, but the footsteps and banging just kept following her wherever she went. Even when she was running and screaming, the steps ran and followed her until she finally ran outside to daylight. This story has been validated by my other aunts and uncles, but let me share my own experience. Since my grandfather is a World War II veteran, he's seen and experienced a lot more than most other people. The whole family believes the spirit protected him through the war, since one of his experiences was running back and forth along the front line in an intense gunfight between Filipino and Japanese troops. He was commanding his troops back then. In any case, fast forward to the year 2004. My whole family was relaxing in our rest house about 40 miles north of this city. The land the house is standing on is cursed. All those who have owned have gone bankrupt. I believe this is true since my grandfather is losing a lot of money to an evil and possibly possessed eldest daughter. My experience happened while falling asleep in his room. Strangely enough, I felt an intense presence within the room, but I didn't feel scared or creeped out, which is something I am prone to feel. The presence just felt safe, but it sure was there, as I could feel it enveloping me. I was half asleep then, and simply fell back into my deep slumber a minute later. I later narrated my experience to my grandfather, and he simply smiled and said, "Yes, it's true." I wasn't born with the ability to see ghosts, unlike most of my maternal family, but I do know when they want to be felt, and I can somewhat read other people's minds and form somewhat of a subconscious link with them while talking or engaging in casual conversation. Another story involves the death of one of our longtime nannies in a spot she loved to sit on during the afternoons. She died of an embolism close to a year ago. One of our maids told us that on the night of her funeral, our maid was cleaning the plates up all alone in the house. Our whole family was in a rest house where the funeral was held, when all of a sudden, the dog started barking rather wildly. She looked out the kitchen window towards the porch where the dogs were barking and could see them looking up at an invisible figure while howling and barking all at the same time. The porch was where our nanny used to sit during the afternoons before she died. The invisible figure soon retreated back into the house, as if retiring for the night. Take note, this all happened at the night of my nanny's funeral, probably visiting one last time before passing on to the other side. Oh, you're still here? I think we just barely ended the video. I just wanted to say, you can comment, like, and subscribe if you really liked it. I'm not trying to influence your opinion or anything, but, you might have to because, we're in dire circumstances. You know why? Because if you don't comment, like, and subscribe, I lose my sanity. I could become a ghost, but if I became a ghost, I'd end up like just another narrator, except a ghost narrator. And that's pretty cool, right? Anyway, guys, I'm totally kidding. I encourage you guys to share my video as well. I know that sounds annoying to say, but, it helps reach an audience that is far beyond my comprehension, so we can find potential little phantoms that can hug up on me and cuddle with me until they're satisfied. I don't know what the hell I'm saying these days, but you know what? It's only fair because I haven't made sense since 1965, and I'm not about to start trying. But I'll shut up again. I don't know when this phantom is ever gonna shut up, but I think I'll try again. Love you guys, and you know what? Love you always.